before you. You're watching the number of laps, making sure that we've got a valid handoff. A handoff occurs in the passing zone. It's that triangle. And we're watching not the feet of the player, we're watching the baton. Okay, so if I'm handing off to the next person, and this is the baton, I can have my baton across that first line and not have my feet across it, and my buddy can grab the baton and take off because the baton is in the passing zone. The same thing when I'm exiting. I can be completely out with my feet and have my hand back like this and hand off to the person behind me. That's different rules than when I was a kid, where we're always staring at the feet, all right? We're worried about the baton. If the baton goes outside of the square at any time, the game's over for that team. So in other words, they drop the baton, it's bouncing on the ground. It's fine, they can pick it up. If it bounces outside the square, the game's over. What else? You're going to watch that far pin to make sure they don't go outside of their zone. In the Sparkies, remember we said we don't really care if they go outside their zone to get that handoff of that animal, right, in the Sparky Safari. This one, these older kids, we do care. They've gone into another team's zone and they could possibly interfere with their pass.
Yielding?
Yep, that's the passing rule. And I'm sure no one online can read all of this, but all the relays and all the running games, except three-legged race, there's a passing rule. And that means, now this would never happen. If I were to catch up to the person in front of me, because I'm not fast enough anymore to catch anyone, but if I were to catch up to them and touch them with my hand, they need to yield that little inside lane for me to pass them. Now, when I'm touching them, I'm not whacking them with the baton, okay? I'm touching them with my hand, and I don't have to beat on them, but I also have to maintain that distance. So if I were to catch the person in front of me, tap them, and then slow down, they don't have to yield. Does that make sense? Now, they're not going to know that you've slowed down, but sometimes coaches get upset because, oh, my player touched them and they didn't yield, or your player backed off. Your player slowed down. Sometimes when they get tagged, this person just gets an extra burst of speed and they take off. At that point, they've increased that gap, and your player's going to have to touch them again for them to yield. But anyway, let's say they've maintained it. I reach out, I touch them, they yield over. They've got the pin they're going to plus one pin. So they have at a maximum a half a lap, at a minimum 1 foot over a quarter of a lap. And sometimes we've got three-way circles, so it varies as to how much time is there. The circle director is the one that's going to make that call, not a line judge, okay? Because the circle director, the instant they see one team getting past, they're kind of doing one of this, they're watching, because they're watching for that hand being touched. A couple ways for them to be disqualified, and the circle director is the one that makes this call. If the player that's getting touched does not yield, just maintains it. Now, if it's a running relay, and I'm the one getting touched, and I've got a few steps before I have to hand off to my buddy, he doesn't have to yield, all right? Because all of a sudden you're going to hand off and somebody's cutting in front of you and going to knock the thing out of your hand. So let them, that's okay, if they're getting ready to hand off right there. But if they've still got a half a lap before they're handing off, they should be yielding. Failure to move may result in disqualification and unsportsmanlike conduct, all right? If they're doing it on purpose, if they're being a wide body and not letting somebody pass. Because if they pass me, they win the game and they might win the meet, kind of a thing. So that's a circle director call. The other thing is that if I were to catch somebody and stiff arm them so hard that I send them flying or shove them out of the way, at that point, it's the circle director's call as to whether or not that's a disqualification, unnecessary roughness. If they send somebody flying, they're disqualified and they lose their sportsmanship points for that game because we don't want to see that. I've seen it happen mostly in three-legged race where somebody will